Marcus, you raised over $800,000.
Every dollar was meant for the vision.
The man you're looking at is Michael Mandel Baldwin, a trusted assistant pastor and the man behind Miracle Mansion. What happens next exposes him as the architect of an $800,000 fraud built entirely on his congregation's faith.
But the complex was never built,
I truly believed we would break ground.
and the families in your church paid for it.
He would not get the chance to finish that sentence. Within 72 hours, federal agents would seize his laptop, 14 banker's boxes of investor files, and a glossy 28-page marketing portfolio for a Christian family entertainment complex that did not exist and never had. 4 states. More than $800,000. Dozens of widows, retirees, pastors, and entire congregations who trusted a man with a pulpit and a song in his throat. The man you just watched is Michael Mandel Baldwin, assistant pastor and musical director in Northern Virginia, and the only thing he ever actually built was the lie. Quick question before we go any further. Have you ever put money into something because the person asking went to your church, sat in your pew, sang in your choir? Drop a comment and tell me how it ended for you. And if you are not subscribed yet, fix that right now. We cover the cases that hide behind a Sunday smile every single week. Michael Mandel Baldwin was born in Washington, D.C. in 1969 and raised across the Anacostia River in a brick row house his grandmother had bought on a maid's salary in 1956. His mother worked the second shift at a laundromat off Minnesota Avenue, folding strangers' bedsheets until midnight for $4.50 an hour. His father was a part-time diesel mechanic at a Metro bus yard and a full-time deacon at Mount Calvary Missionary Baptist, a storefront church wedged between a barbershop and a corner store on Naylor Road. From the time Michael could walk, his life ran on a single rhythm. School all week, church all weekend, choir practice on Thursday nights, deacon's meeting on Saturday afternoons. He learned to play piano before he learned to read. The instrument was a battered Wurlitzer, upright the church had inherited from a funeral home in 1971, complete with a chipped middle C and the faint smell of carnations baked into the wood. By age 9, Michael could sit in for the regular pianist when she had bursitis. By 12, he was leading the youth choir from the Keys. The deacons called him gifted. His mother called him chosen. Michael called himself something quieter, but he liked the way the room watched him when he sat at the bench. He graduated from Anacostia High School in 1987 and enrolled at Howard University that fall on a partial music scholarship of $1,400 a semester. He majored in music education, sang baritone in the Howard Gospel Choir, and worked the overnight shift stocking shelves at a Safeway on Georgia Avenue for $7.25 an hour. 2 of his professors filed formal evaluations on him during his junior year. The first called him musically precise, vocally controlled, naturally drawn to leadership. The second wrote, more cautiously, that Michael was prone to overstating his accomplishments when given the floor, and recommended a counseling session about resume integrity. That counseling session never happened. He left Howard 1 semester short of his degree in the spring of 1991. He told everyone he would re-enroll the following year. He never went back. He told the congregations he would later serve that he had completed his degree. He had not. For the next decade, he moved between musical director positions at small churches across Prince George's County and Northern Virginia. He played weddings on Saturdays for $250 a service. He recorded session work for a regional gospel label out of Largo, Maryland, earning $45 a track. He married a woman named Yolanda Reeves in June of 1996 at her father's church in Suitland, fathered 2 children within 4 years, and bought a 3-bedroom townhouse in Woodbridge, Virginia, on a 30-year mortgage with a finished basement he converted into a home studio. By 2009, he was 40 years old, behind on the mortgage, 2 credit cards past due, and tired of being the man who showed up at other men's churches to play other men's music. He had a notebook full of ideas, the spiral kind from a CVS. One of those ideas, written on the second page in blue ink and underlined twice, said this: A family entertainment complex, Christian-owned, the Disney of the Beltway. Underneath, in smaller letters, "Sell the dream first, build it later." He brought that notebook to a job interview at a growing non-denominational congregation in Alexandria, Virginia, in the late summer of 2009. The senior pastor, a quiet 62-year-old named Reverend Calvin Hodge, needed a musical director who could also handle assistant pastor duties and community programming. Baldwin presented well. He talked about his Howard training. He talked about his deacon father. He talked at length about wanting to build something lasting for the next generation. Reverend Hodge later said the phrase had moved him. Baldwin was hired on a Wednesday and led his first service that Sunday. The congregation, just under 900 members at that point, loved him within a month. He was warm, articulate, talented at the keys, and he hugged everyone on the way out the door. Reverend Hodge, who preferred quiet administration to public performance, exhaled. He had found someone with energy. It would take 12 years for that energy to be revealed as something else entirely. To understand what Michael Baldwin did, you have to understand the world he operated inside. Northern Virginia in the early 2010s was full of growing black non-denominational churches with national ambitions. Congregations of 800, 1,200, 2,000 members, multi-site campuses, television ministries, bookstores in the lobby. The senior pastors talked openly about kingdom economics, generational wealth, and the idea that the black church was finally going to own real estate, own media, own enterprise. Investment in church-affiliated ventures was no longer taboo. In some pulpits, it was framed as a spiritual obligation, a way of voting with your tithe. Inside that environment, the assistant pastor role was a position of enormous practical trust. The senior pastor preached on Sunday. The assistant pastor ran the building Monday through Saturday. He led the music. He spoke at the midweek services. He counseled members in his office. He sat in on the tithing meetings. He was the one who knew everyone's name, everyone's job, everyone's wedding anniversary, everyone's grief. When a congregant came into financial windfall, an inheritance, a divorce settlement, a 401k rollover, a life insurance payout, the assistant pastor often heard about it before the spouse did, sometimes before the bank did. That was the trust Michael Baldwin walked into in 2009. And that was the trust he would systematically convert into capital over the next 12 years. The legal vehicle he used was a limited liability company he registered with the Virginia State Corporation Commission on December 14, 2009, under the name Miracle Mansion, LLC. He listed himself as Chief Executive Officer and sole managing member. The stated business purpose on the original filing was acquisition, development, and operation of a family entertainment property in the greater Washington metropolitan region. There was no land. There were no investors yet. There was no business plan beyond a notebook page and a name and a $40 filing fee paid out of his checking account. But the LLC was real on paper. The Bank of America business account was real. The business cards he printed at a strip mall print shop in Springfield were real, embossed in heavy cream stock with gold trim. And to a congregation member sitting across from him in his office on a Tuesday afternoon in 2010, looking at a glossy folder and a man in a sport coat who had just prayed with them about their dying aunt, the entire thing looked exactly like what it pretended to be. A real estate development opportunity offered by a trusted man of God. No one in the church asked to see the land. No one asked to see the permits. No one asked who else was on the board. No one called the State Corporation Commission to verify the filings. No one ran the LLC name through Westlaw or even Google. No one checked, not once, not for 12 years. The first investor wrote a check on a Sunday afternoon in March 2010. Her name was Eleanor Whitman. She was 62 years old, a retired postal clerk from Hyattsville, recently widowed, and she had just received a small life insurance payout from her husband's policy. Baldwin had played at the funeral 2 months earlier. He had refused to take a fee. Eleanor walked into his office after the 11 o'clock service. sat down in the upholstered chair across from his desk, and slid a check for $9,000 across the laminate. She said, "I wanted to do something good. Calvin would have wanted that." Baldwin promised her a quarterly return of 8% and a place on the donor wall when the complex opened. He hugged her at the door. He prayed over the check before she left. He deposited it in the Miracle Mansion account on Monday morning at 9:15. By Friday of that same week, 3,000 of it had been withdrawn at an ATM near a Hampton Inn in Charlotte, North Carolina, where Baldwin had spent 2 nights with a woman who was not his wife. That was the template. The pitch evolved over the years, but the underlying machinery stayed exactly the same. Baldwin would identify a target. The target was almost always a member of his own congregation, a member of a sister church where he had been invited to perform, or a fellow pastor at a smaller church who wanted to participate in something larger than themselves. He would set a meeting, usually in his church office, on a weekday afternoon, sometimes in a hotel conference room when he was traveling, occasionally over biscuits and gravy at a Cracker Barrel off Interstate 95. He would arrive with a binder. The binder was 28 pages, full color, professionally printed on heavy stock with a metallic spine. The cover read, "Miracle Mansion, a one-of-a-kind Christian family entertainment complex," in raised gold lettering. Inside were architectural renderings he had paid a freelance graphic designer in Annandale $800 to mock up, complete with parking lot schematics and a fake site map overlaid on satellite imagery of a vacant field in Loudoun County that he did not own and had never approached the owners of. There were diagrams of an indoor theme park, a faith-based movie theater with stadium seating for 400, a banquet hall rated for 1,000 guests, a recording studio, and a 120-room hotel. And then there was page 11. On page 11 of the binder, under the heading Strategic Partners and Endorsements, Baldwin listed the names and full-color logos of well-known American corporations and Christian media organizations. None of them had ever heard of Miracle Mansion. None of them had endorsed anything. None of them had been contacted. Baldwin had taken their logos off the public internet and dropped them into the layout in Adobe InDesign. To a 68-year-old retiree from Norfolk who had never seen a real prospectus, page 11 looked like Wall Street. By 2014, the pitch had a name. He called it GroundSwell 73. GroundSwell 73 was a piece of numerology dressed up as finance. 73 acres of land, he would say. 7,300 investors, each contributing $73 per month for 73 months. He would write the numbers on a whiteboard in his office. He would multiply them out loud. He would arrive at a total of just over $39 million and let it sit in the air. Then he would say, and he had rehearsed this line in his bathroom mirror until it sounded inevitable, "That is not my math. That is God's math. The number keeps coming back." He took GroundSwell 73 on the road. He pitched it at a small Baptist convention in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the spring of 2015 from a hotel ballroom dais. He pitched it at a pastor's breakfast in Jacksonville, Florida, in the fall of 2016, over scrambled eggs and grits at a DoubleTree. He pitched it from the pulpit of a partner church in Macon, Georgia, on a Sunday morning in March of 2018, dressed in a cream 3-piece suit, walking the aisle, asking for a show of hands. 63 people raised their hands that morning. 41 of them eventually sent money. 5 sent more than $10,000 apiece. The escalation was steady and disciplined. By 2017, he had stopped writing investors back when they asked for quarterly updates. By 2019, he had begun making Ponzi-style payments, small returns wired to the earliest investors, funded directly by the deposits of the newest ones, just enough to keep the testimonies flowing through the church grapevine. By 2020, he had paid out at least $150,000 to other individuals helping him run the operation, including a cousin in Capitol Heights who handled the printing and courier runs, and a former church board member in Tampa who made warm introductions to Florida pastors. The signs were everywhere if anyone had looked. Baldwin drove a new Cadillac Escalade. He vacationed in Nassau and Turks and Caicos. He paid cash for his daughter's wedding at a hotel in Tyson's Corner. His wife stopped asking where the money came from sometime in 2018. No one in the congregation noticed. No one in the partner churches noticed. Reverend Hodge, working 60 hours a week on his own preaching schedule and his own diabetes, never reviewed the Miracle Mansion LLC. Why would he? It was Michael's project. Michael had built it. By the summer of 2021, more than $800,000 had flowed into the Miracle Mansion bank account. Not 1 acre of land had been purchased. Not 1 architect had been engaged. Not 1 permit had been pulled. The unraveling started with a phone call from Little Rock. A retired schoolteacher named Carolyn Briggs had invested $22,000 in GroundSwell 73 over the course of 4 years, in increments of $73 per month, plus 2 larger lump sum contributions she had made after particularly moving sermons by Baldwin at her sister-in-law's church. She had been promised quarterly statements. She had received exactly 2 photocopied pages in the entire 4 years, both in 2017, both signed in the same blue ink. By the spring of 2021, she had not received any communication from Baldwin at all in 18 months. Carolyn's son, an attorney in Memphis named Darius Briggs, came to visit his mother that Easter weekend. He noticed the Miracle Mansion folder on her kitchen counter next to the church bulletin. He flipped through it idly. He stopped on page 11. He worked corporate litigation. He recognized 2 of the corporate logos because he had deposed in-house counsel for one of those companies the previous year. He picked up his phone. Within 48 hours, he had confirmed what his mother had not yet allowed herself to believe. The corporations had never endorsed Miracle Mansion. None of them had ever been contacted. There was no record of a project by that name with the Fairfax County Zoning Office or the Loudoun County Zoning Office. There was no land. The LLC was current on its annual filings, but had never reported a single acquisition, a single permit, a single capital expenditure beyond printing costs. Darius called the U.S. Secret Service field office in Memphis on a Tuesday morning in April. The Secret Service handles federal financial crimes and wire fraud. The agent who took the call, a 10-year veteran named Special Agent Patricia Holloway, asked Darius to email her everything he had by end of business. He sent her 43 attachments. The case was opened that afternoon. What followed was a 6-month investigation that quietly stretched across 4 states. Agents pulled bank records from 3 institutions in 2 federal districts. They interviewed 27 investors in person and another 19 by telephone. They subpoenaed printing records from the strip mall print shop in Springfield, which still had the original digital files. They identified at least 4 churches that had been pitched in person and another 11 that had received GroundSwell 73 mailers. They cross-referenced Baldwin's travel records against deposit timelines and found a near-perfect correlation. Every speaking engagement in another state was followed within 72 hours by deposits to the Miracle Mansion account from that same area code. Baldwin, meanwhile, was preparing for a building campaign at his own Alexandria church. Reverend Hodge wanted to expand the parking lot and add a fellowship hall. Baldwin volunteered to chair the fundraising committee. He stood at the pulpit on a Sunday morning in early October 2021 and asked the congregation to dig deep. He used the phrase kingdom investment. He used the phrase legacy building. He used the phrase, this is the moment God prepared us for. He had no idea that 2 members of that congregation had already been interviewed by the Secret Service 2 weeks earlier. He had no idea that the federal grand jury in the Western District of North Carolina, sitting in Charlotte, had begun reviewing his bank records the previous Wednesday afternoon. He had no idea that the GroundSwell 73 binder, his most prized creation, the thing he had spent $800 and 12 years polishing, was about to become Exhibit A in his own indictment. The catalyst, in the end, was page 11. The logos he had lifted from the public internet to make his fantasy look credible. Those logos were the thread the prosecution would pull, and the entire 12-year structure would unspool in a matter of months. We are heading into the federal investigation and the courtroom next. If you have made it this far, you already know this channel does not sand the edges off these stories. Subscribe if you want to see exactly how the system handles a man who weaponized a pulpit for 12 straight years. The sentence in this one is not the ending you might be expecting, and the judge's words from the bench are worth waiting for. The federal search warrant was executed on the morning of October 19, 2021. 6 Secret Service agents arrived at Baldwin's townhouse in Woodbridge at 6:15 a.m. 3 more arrived at his church office in Alexandria at 7 o'clock. They carried a federal warrant signed by a magistrate judge in Charlotte the previous afternoon. They were looking for laptops, hard drives, financial records, marketing materials, and any documentation related to Miracle Mansion, LLC, or GroundSwell 73, or its variants. What they found, agents would later testify at trial, exceeded their expectations. In Baldwin's home office, behind a locked closet door that an agent opened with a small pry bar, agents recovered 14 banker's boxes of physical files. Each box was labeled in Baldwin's own handwriting in black Sharpie. The labels included AR Investors 2015 to 2018, FL, Pastors Outreach, GIA Pitch Materials, Via Congregation Targets, and most strikingly, a box marked simply "Do Not Discard." Inside that box was the original master copy of the GroundSwell 73 binder, hand-annotated in red ink, including margin notes such as "Use this Disney line for older crowds," soften endorsement language for legal, and on page 11, in tight cursive, "Verify none of these companies will sue." He had verified. He had decided the risk was worth it. He had written it down in his own hand. The laptop was worse. Forensic technicians at the Secret Service's Electronic Crimes Lab recovered a folder labeled MM_financials containing 71 Excel spreadsheets. The spreadsheets did not track land acquisition because there was none. They tracked investors: name, home church, amount contributed, date contributed, promised return, number of follow-up contacts, and, in a separate column, a value labeled simply trust level with integer entries from 1 to 5. Eleanor Whitman, the postal clerk who had given him $9,000 on a Sunday afternoon in March 2010, was rated a 5. Carolyn Briggs, the retired schoolteacher in Little Rock whose son had triggered the entire investigation, was rated a 4. The text messages were the smoking gun the prosecution would lean on hardest at trial. Baldwin had communicated with his cousin, the cousin in Capitol Heights who handled printing and occasional courier runs, through standard SMS messages from his personal cell. The messages had never been deleted. Forensic recovery pulled them clean. Baldwin, March 14, 2017. Need 200 more binders for the Jack's trip next week. Update the partners page. Add the Chick-fil-A logo. They won't check. Cousin, March 14, 2017. You sure about that one? That one's risky. Baldwin, March 14, 2017. They want to believe, just print it. Baldwin, June 8, 2019. Carolyn in Little Rock asking for the Q2 statement again, 3rd time. Cousin, June 8, 2019. Send her something. Pay her a little something off the top. Baldwin, June 8, 2019. Sending 800 buys me 6 months of quiet. Baldwin, January 22nd, 2021. Got another church in Georgia. Pastor's brother is all in. $50K commit. Cousin, January 22nd, 2021. Brother, when does this end? Baldwin, January 22nd, 2021. When the land buys itself. The grand jury saw those exchanges in March 2022. The federal indictment was returned the following week. 11 counts of wire fraud. 3 counts of securities fraud. The case was assigned to the Western District of North Carolina because 2 of the largest victim wires had originated from accounts in Charlotte, giving that district clean venue. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning in April 2022 in the parking lot of his Alexandria church at 10:45 a.m. Baldwin had just finished an early staff meeting in the fellowship hall. He was walking to his Cadillac Escalade with a paper coffee cup in one hand and a fresh Miracle Mansion folder tucked under his arm, a folder he was planning to drop off with a potential investor at a Bob Evans in Manassas at 11:30. Two agents from the Secret Service's Charlotte field office, accompanied by an FBI liaison and a uniformed Alexandria officer, met him at the driver's side door. Special Agent Patricia Holloway, the woman who had taken Darius Briggs's call 13 months earlier in Memphis, identified herself first. Holloway, Michael Baldwin. We are with the United States Secret Service. I need you to set the coffee down and place your hands on the vehicle. Baldwin. What is this about? I have a meeting in an hour. Holloway. Sir, place your hands on the vehicle. Baldwin. Officer, I am the assistant pastor here. There has to be a mistake. Holloway. There is no mistake, sir. We have a federal warrant for your arrest. Wire fraud and securities fraud. You are familiar with Miracle Mansion, LLC. Baldwin did not answer that question. The folder slipped from under his arm and hit the asphalt face down. The coffee cup followed and split at the seam. The agent picked up the folder, glanced at the cover, and showed it to her partner without changing her expression. Holloway's partner. That, the binder. Holloway. That is the binder. Baldwin. I want to call my attorney. Holloway. You will have that opportunity at processing. Hands behind your back, please. Witnesses in the parking lot, two staff members, and a janitor on a smoke break would later tell investigators that Baldwin did not resist. He did not cry. He did not protest his innocence in the manner congregants might have expected. Instead, as the cuffs went on and the agents began the walk to the unmarked sedan, he said one full sentence, quietly, to no one in particular, and certainly not for the record. Baldwin. I knew this day was coming. Then he asked, again, for a lawyer. And he said nothing else for the rest of the day. Reverend Hodge was notified by phone 40 minutes later by an FBI liaison. He had to be told 3 times before he understood. He sat in his office for an hour without moving. Then he called an emergency closed session meeting of the church board for that same evening. By the end of the day, Michael Baldwin had been removed from every position he held within the ministry. His name was scraped off the church website overnight by the media director. His office was emptied into cardboard boxes by Saturday morning. The Sunday bulletin for that weekend was redesigned from scratch. The choir sang without a director that Sunday. The congregation sang anyway. The federal trial began in Charlotte on November 14th, 2022, before United States District Judge Robert J. Conrad, Jr., in a wood-paneled courtroom on the 4th floor of the Charles R. Jonas Federal Building. The trial lasted 6 full days. The government called 19 witnesses, including 5 victims, 3 federal forensic accountants, 2 Secret Service agents, the freelance graphic designer from Annandale, and the cousin from Capitol Heights, who had agreed to cooperate in exchange for non-prosecution. The defense, led by court-appointed attorney Stephen McAllister, called exactly 2 witnesses, both character references. The prosecution's case rested on 3 pillars: the binder, the spreadsheets, and the victims themselves. Carolyn Briggs flew in from Little Rock to testify on the 3rd day. She was 70 years old by then. She walked to the witness stand with a cane and a manila envelope of photocopied statements. She told the jury, in a calm and even voice, that she had taught 5th grade reading at Stevens Elementary School in Pulaski County for 38 years and had saved $22,000 in a Roth account for the grandchildren who would never see it. She told them she had believed Michael Baldwin because he had quoted Proverbs during their very first phone call in 2017, and because his speaking voice had reminded her of her late husband, who had been a deacon for 40 years. Eleanor Whitman, the original investor from March of 2010, testified by video deposition. She was 83 years old and on home oxygen, unable to travel from Hyattsville. The jury watched her on a large screen as she described, in a thin but unwavering voice, the day she had handed Michael Baldwin her husband's life insurance check across his desk in the assistant pastor's office. Whitman on the video screen. He prayed over it. He held my hands. I trusted him with the only thing my husband had left me. I am not asking for my money back. I do not expect to see that money again in this life. I am asking for the truth to be told in open court. The defense argued that Miracle Mansion had been a legitimate, if poorly executed, business venture that had failed due to a combination of economic conditions, the COVID-19 pandemic, and Baldwin's own administrative inexperience. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, including a working lunch. On November 18, 2022, the jury returned a verdict on all 14 counts. Guilty. Federal sentencing was set for August 20th, 2024. The 21-month delay was procedural and involved an extensive pre-sentencing investigation by U.S. probation, victim impact submissions from 41 identified victims across 4 states, and a defense motion for downward departure that was eventually denied. Baldwin was released on a personal recognizance bond during that period and ordered to surrender his passport. He moved out of the Woodbridge townhouse in the spring of 2023. Yolanda filed for divorce that May after 27 years of marriage. His adult children stopped returning his calls in June. At sentencing in Charlotte, Judge Conrad addressed the packed courtroom directly before pronouncing the sentence. The transcript ran 4 pages. Judge Conrad: Mr. Baldwin, the most painful element of this case is not the dollar amount, though $800,000 is significant and the harm to these victims is real and lasting. It is the trust. You stood in a pulpit. You sang at funerals. You prayed with widows in their living rooms. And while you were doing those things, you were running a calculation in your head about how much each of them was worth to you. You committed that calculation to spreadsheets that this court has now seen with its own eyes. The phrase you used was trust level. You assigned a number to that trust. The court takes no satisfaction in this sentence. But the court will not minimize what you did, and the court will not pretend that what you did was an ordinary fraud. It was a desecration. The sentence was 27 months in federal prison and 3 additional years of supervised release. Restitution was ordered in the amount of $812,400, an amount the court openly acknowledged would likely never be recovered in full. The U.S. Secret Service, which had led the investigation from its Charlotte field office, took the unusual step of issuing a public statement thanking the victims by name, with their permission, for their courage in coming forward. Baldwin self-surrendered to a low-security federal correctional facility in West Virginia in October of 2024. His scheduled release year is 2026. After release, he will spend 3 years on supervised release, during which he is permanently barred from holding any fiduciary role, from soliciting any investment of any kind, and from serving in any official capacity within a religious organization that handles donations. The Miracle Mansion was never built. The 73 acres were never purchased. The binders, every recovered copy, sit in a federal evidence locker in Charlotte, North Carolina, where they will remain until the case is fully closed. This case was disturbing, but the case on the right-hand side is even more outrageous. Click it now.